that Korean system. And it is very heartening to know that only 4% is electronic books. But this is not to say that we need to ignore. And I'm really very happy that Mr. Setu Madhavan has taken upon himself the responsibility of changing to also taking up the e-books. So I'm very sure that while this is absolutely essential, in my heart, I'm completely convinced that no matter what kind of revolution takes place electronically, book reading will continue to grow in our country. And that is where the statistics that you have given about Korea is very, very encouraging. But at the same time, we must adopt to the new technology. I would certainly expect the National Book Trust to lead the digital contents to the section of readers, young readers who are young and techno-savvy. I believe that the National Book Trust has produced a lot of good literature, and over the last more than 5 decades, some of these books may be out of print, and NBT might want to consider using the technology, digital technology, to revive these books and make them available in digital version to the enthusiastic readers in all possible languages. I believe that the lecture which is about to be delivered by Professor Andre Béteille would highlight the facets of reading and its relevance in society. This is something that we have been all waiting to hear from, so I'm not going to stay between you and Professor Andre Béteille. But before I close, I must take this opportunity to congratulate everybody in the National Book Trust on this 56th Foundation Day. Thank you, and all the very best.
Mr. Setu Madhavan, Dr. Jadhav, Mr. Sikandar, and friends, let me say that I'm very happy to be here with you on the occasion on which you celebrate the Founders' Day. And I would like to say something about reading and also about writing and the changes that are taking place in our practices of reading and writing. These changes may not be very easily perceptible on the surface, but I think they are important changes that are taking place. And I'll start with something which may appear to you to be somewhat trivial, and that is the practice of writing letters, not business letters or administrative letters, but letters that are written for pleasure. That I think there's a difference between reading and writing for a specific purpose and reading and writing for pleasure. Somebody asked me some time ago from the Nehru Memorial Museum whether I would be prepared to, they have an archive, whether I would be prepared to give over my papers to their archive. And I said that isn't it a little premature for you to start collecting my remains? And they said, no, we just want your permission in principle. So I got hold of my daughter. I was surprised to find how many letters I've preserved. And I was not a great letter writer by the standards of those times. I can mention 2 great letter writers, Professor N.K. Bose, who was a great anthropologist and also a secretary to Mahatma Gandhi and wrote extensively about Mahatma Gandhi. He was writing letters all the time. And then Professor M. N. Srinivas, who was an indefatigable letter writer. And he would write his letters on these inland, generally on these inland letter papers. And he would start on one side, go on to the next side, then to the back, and then get on to the margins. Sometimes, when I was reading these letters, written, say, 40, 50 years ago when I was a student, these are not all letters only from important people. They were letters of various kinds, letters from my fellow students who were junior to me in college asking me for tips, letters occasionally from the mothers of my friends, written in English, written in Bengali. And in one particular case, I don't think that people can write letters of that kind. I retrieved an envelope which had 3 letters, and there were several such envelopes. For some time, I was exiled to a small town called Giridih. I was working with the Indian Statistical Institute, and I wasn't getting along very well with my boss. So my boss decided that I should go and spend some time in Giridih, where they had an office. And it was a very lonely place. It was not a very congenial place. Then I discovered that there was a very congenial Bengali family there. That family consisted husband, wife, and a daughter of, she was then 12 and became 13 before I left Giridih. And the envelope always contained 3 separate letters. One envelope, but 3 separate letters. And I don't think, I've asked many people among my friends, do you write letters by hand anymore? And they would say that, well, I'm sure there, I do too. I'm sure there are, but this practice is dying out, and people now say that they don't have the time, they're too busy. They don't have the time to do that. And I always ask them, do you think Mr. Nehru wasn't busy? Can you think of the number of letters of various kinds that Mr. Nehru wrote? I think we must admit to ourselves that this practice is now being displaced by other practices. And I ask myself, what does this displacement mean for the quality and texture of our personal relations? Not simply what it means for the efficiency of administration. I'm sure the efficiency of administration has gone up, although there would be many people who would argue to the contrary. This is not what I'm asking. What does it mean? The displacement of the handwritten letter, the virtual disappearance of the handwritten letter, what does it mean for the quality of personal relations among people? And I was surprised at my own discovery, because these contained letters written a long time ago. I used to know a lady much older than me. She was an Assamese lady, but she spoke Bengali very well. So one day, I must have decided to go to the science college, University Science College, where I had been a student, and ask one of my friends, who was bilingual in English and Assamese, to help me to compose a letter to her in Assamese. The script is the same virtually as the Bengali script. And I labored and I sent her, I must have sent her the letter, because what I have is a reply. And in the reply she says, "It's a very nice letter you have written, but I can guess how that letter came to be written and who helped you to write that letter." I think that, this is a different texture of personal relations, which I think is being displaced by other and more efficient modes of communication. Efficiency is not all that there is to human relations. I think one must remember this. And it's not simply that people, I think that, I've checked letters on the internet, and now communication through the internet is also being displaced among very young people by this, the mobile phone and the SMS, the text message. So these are cycles of change that we are going through, and I think that we must take note of what these changes are and what it means for the efficiency of administrative life, for the efficiency of commercial life, but also for the texture of personal relations among people. Now, having said all of this, I would like to point out that reading and writing have undergone changes and will no doubt undergo more changes in the future. That is the point I was trying to make. I would like to take a long historical view. I'm an anthropologist. I'm an anthropologist myself, and I specialized in the study of the simpler societies, which used to be called primitive societies in the past. In the 19th century, when the discipline of anthropology emerged in Western countries, the anthropologists did not study Western society or even Indian society, the larger civilizations. They studied what were called primitive societies, tribal societies. Then gradually, they felt that the term primitive is a little disdainful and we ought to find a better term. So they found the better term, and that better term was pre-literate societies. I think we must recognize that societies have existed. Societies have existed for centuries and for millennia and have gone about their business without the aid of reading and writing. Without the aid of reading and writing. Now, if you look at the distinctive features of human societies, I think you will find that articulate speech, our ability to communicate with each other, is perhaps the most distinctive feature of the human species as compared to other animal species. Other animal species may develop some token symbolic ways of communication, but once you begin to speak and read, once you begin to speak and hear, then the scope for communication becomes extended to a very substantial extent. As reading and writing are added on, I think the resources of the community begin to expand. And these resources expand enormously because they can communicate across space, and also because they can communicate across time, because they can. But it's not all roses, you know. When reading and writing were first developed, it also divided the population. It divided the population between those who had a monopoly of reading and writing and those who were left out of the benefits of reading and writing. So when we talk about pre-literate societies, there are many communities which are denied the benefit of reading and writing, and I think it introduces a wedge within the larger society, between those who speak only and those others who can also read and write in addition to being able to speak. And I think as soon as, and those who are able to read and write initially try very hard to maintain their monopoly over reading and writing and tend to become very exclusive and they tend to develop technical as well as specialized vocabulary, idiom, expressions, which acts as barriers between members of the same larger society. And I don't know that many languages, but my first language, my native language, is Bengali. And it is obvious that when I listen to someone speaking in Bengali, 2 or 3 persons speaking in Bengali, I can say roughly, from the way in which they use the Bengali language, to which social class or social stratum they become. This is anybody, I don't know whether this is also true of Marathi, but I think that this is particularly true of the Bengali language, because there are first of all the regional variations, and there is standard Bengali. We who come from West Bengal, I happen to have learnt my language from my maternal grandmother, who was a Brahmin lady who came from a particular part of West Bengal, where the Bengali that was spoken was considered to be the most chaste and the purest. This is the area around Triveni, not in Hooghly district, Hooghly Nadia district. These are the districts. So I can figure out from the speech of people what, in a very broad way, I'm not a trained linguist, what in fact what is their provenance? Where do they come from? Not just in terms of social stratification and class, but also in terms of the region. And some regional variations, some regional forms acquire the form of standard Bengali, just as they acquire the form of standard English. And we from West Bengal tend to disdain the manner in which Bengali is spoken across the river Padma, that is, in what is now Bangladesh. We tend to disdain that. We tend to believe that they don't really know how to speak. We alone know how to speak. Our speech is a proper speech. And this must be true. I'm pretty sure that this is true of other languages as well. This is certainly true of English. This used to be very, very true of English. And one great English literary critic said that the English are branded on the tongue. You know, when you have sheep and cattle, you brand them on the rump so that you know to whom. So he said that the English are branded on the tongue. As soon as an Englishman opens his mouth, you can make out from which social stratum or which social class he comes. So the point I want to make is that this division within the community, I think, is increased when reading and writing are introduced. This division is increased, at least for some time. This division becomes larger. Because, you know, once you start reading and writing, the language, the forms of expression tend to become more and more standardized. And departures from the standard are carefully noted and have an effect on the way in which Bengali is spoken. For instance, the way in which Bengali is spoken or today, it has been greatly influenced by the combined effect of two developments. One was Shantiniketan and Rabindranath. Rabindranath played an extremely important part in the development of the refined Bengali. So the kind of speech which originated in Shantiniketan was combined with another development in Bengal, which is the development of the Brahmo Samaj. The Brahmo Samaj, which is a religious reform movement with a very strong upper caste, upper class base, also reorganized the manner in which Bengali was spoken. And people are not always very candid about admitting that Rabindranath's Bengali, or the Bengali that was spoken in Shantiniketan, was somewhat affected. It is not the kind of Bengali that would be spoken by my grandmother, although she came from a perfectly respectable lineage. The one person who has admitted this, and I wouldn't have had the courage to bring this up, but for the fact that it was pointed out by one person who is a great Bengali, and that is Satyajit Ray. Satyajit Ray was sent to Shantiniketan. He hated Shantiniketan, and he says that he was sent there because his mother wanted him to spend some time there. So he went there, and he said, I just couldn't bear the affected attitudes of these people, their long hair, and their sing-song manner of speaking their own language. I think reading and writing begins at first as a kind of barrier between those who have a monopoly of reading and writing and those who are excluded from the advantages of reading and writing. And I say that is why today, unlike in Dickens's England or in Balzac's France, it is very difficult to speak about a homogeneous middle class, because not only have disparities of income, occupation, and wealth been reduced, but whereas in the past one important difference between the middle class and the working class was that the middle class had some education. You had to have some education in order to enter the middle class, because you had to be familiar with reading and writing in order to enter the middle class, if middle class is defined in terms of certain occupations and certain styles of life, whereas